This is our fifth Sunday exploring the themes of the most central story of the Hebrew Scriptures, the story of the Exodus. The everyday bravery of several women saves the life of a Hebrew baby who is renamed Moses and brought to live in the palace as the adopted son of the Pharaoh's daughter. Then, in the fullness of time, God calls Moses to speak to the new Pharaoh, to demand the release of Moses' kin, the enslaved Israelites. After a miraculous set of events, thousands of slaves leave Egypt, cross the dangers of the Red Sea, and end up in the wilderness, where God begins to shape them into a new people. Last week we heard stories of the people complaining in the wilderness, frightened that they have left the security of their old lives behind, only to die of hunger and thirst in this barren land. Moses gets frustrated with them, but Yahweh God hears the validity of their fears and reaches out to help. Drawing them into a daily reliance, God acts as a loving parent, providing manna and water to help keep the people alive, and even provides enough so that they can emulate God and rest on the Sabbath day. Give us this day our daily bread comes to life in the wilderness, as the journeying people are provided enough to survive and enough to grow to trust this liberating God, even if they don't really know where they're going. Today's dramatic scene at Mount Sinai signals the fulfillment of the promise that was made to Moses in his first encounter with God on this very mountain back in Exodus chapter 3. I will be with you, God had spoken out of the burning bush, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. That promise becomes a reality in today's passage, as God makes a covenant with the people and gives them the law to shape them into a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. When Moses is called into the clouds surrounding Mount Sinai, it is so that God can begin to give instructions on how the Israelites should live, as free people covenanted in relationship with Yahweh. Laws, rules, regulations, even instructions on how to make priestly robes are part of God's words with Moses. But it all begins with the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, or 10 words as they are translated from the Hebrew, are definitely guidelines that help define a communal space where people can live in safety and peace. With no murder or stealing or lying or cheating, people can be free to trust each other and build good relationships. But the 10 Commandments do more than give just a list of do's and don'ts. They help the Israelites understand who they are. The first 4 commandments that deal specifically with their relationship with God offer a new understanding of who the people are in the world. They are, first and foremost, people in covenant with Yahweh. As such, of course they will only worship this God who brought them out of Egypt. And of course they will honor the mysterious name of this God who chose to reveal their name to them. Maybe less obviously, they will also refrain from making idols to worship, as their neighbors in Egypt had done. And they will begin to practice the ritual of Sabbath rest for no other reason except that that is what God did. As God did, so they will do. And so with their language, with their worship, and with their week, they will demonstrate that they are Yahweh's people and no one else's. Within that understanding that they are now a people of the covenant, there are also 6 commands about interpersonal relationships. I like to refer to these, as some have, as signposts to the kingdom, as they describe an ideal community where relationships are honored, people keep their word and can be trusted, doors do not even have to be locked, and no one even considers wanting, let alone taking, something that does not belong to them. Does that seem too good to be true? Perhaps that's why the Ten Commandments have been painted on walls in courtrooms in the US and taught to us as God's laws that determine who is naughty and who is nice. And when we think of them as laws that determine who should be punished, we will become quick to look for loopholes to explain why we haven't really broken that coveting commandment, or explain why our gossip is harmless and not the same as bearing false witness. We want to be assured that ending an unhealthy marriage is not committing adultery, and that it's okay to not bend over backwards for our parents if they are dysfunctional or abusive. And let me just say to those last two examples, yes, those are okay. God does not expect perfection from human beings. Our ancestors took care of that for us thousands of years ago, thankfully. But what I find life-giving about the Ten Commandments is that they give us something to work towards, signposts that say we are on the right track, a glimpse of what can be when God's will is eventually done. The Ten Commandments set the tone for how the Israelites are to live in relationship with God and with one another. And since they are still in the wilderness, still dependent upon God for daily food, still with no one for company but each other, they have a lot of time to practice. Which is what makes our jump to chapter 32 so jarring. Right after hearing that Yahweh's people are to focus on Yahweh alone and not create idols, we come to the story of the golden calf. It's such a contrast, but understandable in its context. Between chapters 20 and 31, Moses goes up and back down and up again to the mountain, bringing instructions from God to the people. The covenant is made official. Moses is given instructions on how to create an ark to carry the tablets, as well as many other details for their worship life. But eventually, Moses is gone too long for the people's comfort. And in chapter 32, we hear the people's anxiety without their spiritual leader. They turn to Aaron and ask for a substitute. Moses is gone, they say. We need something tangible. We need something we can touch that will stand in for God. Now, Aaron's response is a bit bewildering. Perhaps he thought he'd put an end to their idea if it cost them money, so he asks them to bring gold to offer. But they do. And so he creates an idol, a statue of a calf. Hurrah, say the people, there's our God, there's the one who brought us out of Egypt. It seems so bizarre to us, the readers, to hear this. And yet, perhaps we can think of examples of people that we know who take human-made things like essential oils or fitness regimes or astrology charts or the prosperity gospel and raise them up to godlike status in their lives. We have such a yearning for certainty in our life that a diet guru or a cult leader or an investment counselor can seem like a sure bet when God seems too unreliable. Aaron apparently freaks out a bit at the people's enthusiasm for this golden calf he's created, so he immediately calls for a worship festival for Yahweh to happen the very next day. The people obediently bring their sacrifices in the morning, but the golden calf is still there, and so they eat and drink and party, indulging in practices not appropriate for God's people. Now, we didn't read it, but after this passage, God sees what is happening and wants to consume the people with God's wrath and start all over again, just with Moses. But Moses intervenes and reminds God that God has chosen this people to be in covenant with and has already done this wondrous work of bringing them out of Egypt. God reminds God of God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and God relents. The people are forgiven, but Moses goes down the mountain to yell at the people first. The contrast between the Ten Commandments and the golden calf is stark. The Ten Commandments are a gift, a creation of God, meant to help the people find their identity and practice a new kind of relationship with God and with each other. The golden calf, on the other hand, is a symbol of their insecurity, their longing for the familiar, and a warning of how easy it is to lose sight of what is essential. Although their final destination will be the land of Canaan, Mount Sinai is the Israelites' first real destination, a place to which God has been leading all along, and not just from the escape from Egypt. The whole journey from creation forward has been leading to this place, to this covenant. It is at Sinai that God shows the Israelites the beautiful world in which they're meant to live, and calls them to live in it. It's as if God is saying, this is what you were made for. You are not made to wander, to be afraid, to hunger and thirst, to feel lost. You were made to live in this community of justice, in right relationship with your God. Stay true to these commandments, and this is where you will remain. Of course, they do not stay true, and we do not either. But time and again, God proves God's faithfulness to us and holds up the covenant from both sides, encouraging us and nudging us to return to the path. When we are tempted to replace God's ways with products or practices or people that promise to solve all of our problems, we can remember this story and be reminded that it is the faithfulness of God that sustains us, not what we eat or what we do or where we invest. We are invited into a community of practice to discover God's goodness by committing together to live as God would have us live. So in these wilderness times, let us remember and give thanks for God's loving faithfulness and for this faith community in which to practice what it means to be human and to belong to God. Amen. Let us sing together from More Voices number 182, Grateful.